To start off with that, I would now invite Mr. Mike Ferguson, Pro Vice Chancellor, International Charles Sturt University, to start. Please, sir, it's all yours.
Hi everyone, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to be with you today and to speak to you about what's happening in international education in Australia and its relevance to India. I have known many of you for, I hate to say it, but you can probably tell by the greying on the side of my hair, for 15 years now since I was posted in India. Then worked for the Australian government as Director of International Education Policy, and as advisor to the Immigration Minister at the time for student visa policy and other matters before moving to the university sector. So India has had a long-standing relationship with me. It's been a long-standing love for me to come back, and I'm privileged to be able to do that on a regular basis. It's also a vital market for Australia, as you've heard from Luke from Universities Australia, and you'll hear from others today. And from my own university, Charles Sturt University, India is the most important market for us. The largest component of our students come from India, who choose to study in a great Australian regional destination or one of our city campuses. And we're very much committed to India. We're keen also to build on the growing ties between India and Australia and look at building our transnational education presence here. So just this week, I've signed a couple of dual degree awards, and we have an agent event of our own on Monday to build some of the recruitment ties. But it's no secret that the waters that we're swimming through at the moment are challenging. It's been a very difficult 6 to 12 months for the sector, and particularly in India and for universities like mine that recruit from India. One thing I'm sure we'll all agree on, and if we don't, then we probably should not be in this room, particularly given I heard about AAERI's code of conduct earlier today, is the need for a sector that's underpinned by integrity and quality and sustainability. Everybody here will sign up for that. I personally sign up to that. I do not want to see non-genuine students granted visas. I do not want to see the shonks and crooks, as Minister Clare refers to them, being in business. I want them out of business. I want a genuine and sustainable international education sector. And I know my colleagues from government too want that. The challenge I think we've had has been the journey to that point. I'm sure we'll hear more about Ministerial Direction 107. In my view, one of the poorest pieces of policy that the Australian government has introduced. I wrote an editorial about this in The Australian very shortly after it was introduced, flagging some of the issues, particularly the notion that students will end up choosing a university based on their immigration risk expertise rather than education quality. That is a really, really poor outcome. We want students choosing the university that is the best fit for them. And I was really pleased to hear Minister Clare's remarks a few days ago that once caps come in, Ministerial Direction 107 will go. So fingers crossed that actually does happen. The other element I think that we need to look at is the simplified student visa framework and provider risk ratings. So as many of you will know, I was the architect of that particular framework from my time in the department. And it did, well, you can be the judge of it, but I think it worked well for a while. It doesn't work well now. Immigration risk ratings for providers were not meant to be an immigration risk framework. It was meant to be a gentle incentive for education providers to recruit genuine students and do some basic additional due diligence to weed out clearly non-genuine students. The idea was, and it's still in the public domain, you can read it through the regulatory impact statement, you can read it through the future directions of streamlined visa processing report. The idea was to take immigration risk processing back into the department using a much more complex and sophisticated mechanism to manage risk that looks at all of the aspects associated with the student. I think where we've moved now is that there's been too much emphasis placed on a provider risk rating, and certainly through some of the circular logic that we're seeing that you're a medium risk provider, therefore you're higher risk, therefore you're going to get more visa refusals, therefore your students are going to be delayed, therefore your evidence levels are going to increase, therefore you're going to get more refusals and even more delays. So I think we need to rethink that. I think time has moved on. At the time, it was about this concept of streamlining and streamlined visa processing and really trying to grow Australia's international education sector as quickly as possible and get back to where it was prior to 2008 and 9. And, obviously some of these themes repeat themselves. I think we've moved past that now. And I think if we truly want integrity in the sector, why should not all providers and all students provide evidence of their financial capacity with their student visa? Why should not all students provide evidence of their English language capacity? And then you use a more holistic risk assessment to determine the level of scrutiny and eventually who's granted a visa. So that's something that I put out there. I think with caps coming into play, education providers and agents obviously will still have incentives to scrutinise students and weed out clearly dodgy students and fraud. I think that's in everybody's interest. But I think the risk framework has passed its sell-by date and needs to be replaced. And that's certainly something we'll be pushing forward with government as we move into what I think will be an exciting new phase for international education in Australia. The headwinds we're facing at the moment, they're not indefinite. I think once the legislation for caps passes Senate, probably in the next few weeks, things will start to smooth out. The government will have another mechanism to manage net overseas migration rather than having to use visa refusals to do that. We can look more at sustainability and we'll have a clear road forward. So that's my hope and expectation. I think the sector works best when providers, agents and government work together in a symbiotic relationship with transparency, policy stability and certainty, so that we know what the outcomes will be. We're all working towards the same aims. I think we've lost track of that over the last 6 to 12 months, but I'm confident we'll get back on that track. And I think that Australian international education has an exciting future ahead. I think Australia and India have an exciting future ahead. And very importantly, I think Charles Sturt in India have a very important and successful future ahead. So thank you all very much and enjoy the evening.